Have you had an encounter you'd like to hear narrated on this channel? Well, what are you waiting for? An engraved invitation? Go on, get your booty over there to the computer and type out that email with all the details. Don't you leave a single thing out. I want it all. You can email me at contact@buckeyebigfoot.com. Hello there and welcome, everyone. Now, tonight I have 2 emails for you, and interestingly enough, they are both from Ohio. What are the odds? Anyway, grab your snackage and let's get saddled up. We're going to get tonight's journey down into Sasquatch Valley started right now. Hello, my name is Adam McElroy. I live in Ashtabula County in northeast Ohio. Around 10 years back, I had at least a dozen encounters with what had to be a Bigfoot over a 3-year span. It all happened along a stretch of the Grand River while coon hunting at night, and once during the day squirrel hunting. I never saw anything, just heard either tree knocks that occurred behind me after we'd moved on, maybe 100 yards after taking a coon, or footsteps in the leaves walking around us, and twice vocals. I was hunting alone with the dogs on each occasion but one, during which my 8-year-old daughter at the time was along and heard the tree knocks as well. I have to add that on every occasion, my dogs all were scared, bristling and growling, and they would not leave my side. And on the 2 vocal times, the dogs acted like they lost their minds and instantly treed on empty trees, barking with their eyes rolled back. I add this to emphasize this was not just my imagination. I'd like to tell you about the first encounter. I was hunting solo with my dog, Penny. She was a treeing cur, experienced, and a brave dog. It was October 2nd, before season opened, so we were just running, though I had a .22 rifle and a .357 Magnum on me in case of coyotes. We hunted a big piece of timber that I'd hunted hundreds, if not thousands, of times before. We parked in a gas well around 9 p.m. I released Penny, and she cast out hunting. It wasn't long before things started getting strange. Penny was a silent tracking dog, meaning she only barked after she'd put her game up a tree, but she was running around, yipping like a pup, while she was trailing something. She had quickly crossed a cut cornfield, and I started to follow across when she started back, yipping the entire time. As she came my direction, I called her, meaning to catch her and restart her, thinking she's trailing a deer or a fox for the first time that I'd ever known of, which is a big no-no. But she ignored me and ran around me back into the woods going west. Now that was a surprise. She just didn't act like that. Shaking my head, I started after her, thinking maybe Penny was going to get a reprimand for the first time ever. I'd walked into the woods about a minute, when out of nowhere, I heard this roar coming from the direction of our parked truck. It sounded like from the movie King Kong. It was so loud, no person could possibly replicate it. I actually felt it through my chest and belly, like it washed over me, like I was in a wind tunnel. I'm not embarrassed to say that I actually froze. I could not walk. It was the most terrified I've ever felt up to that point in my life. I froze for what felt like an hour, but was probably more likely less than a minute. When I could finally move enough to draw my .357 Magnum, I thought, there's no way this is enough gun to stop what made that noise. But I was going to try anyway. I really thought I was going to die that night from something in a nightmare. When I could finally move my feet, I checked my Garmin tracker to see where Penny was, and she was a half-mile to the west, sitting still, but not treeing. The roar had come from between the truck and me, and I was not going to leave Penny out there with what I knew to be a Bigfoot by then. So I slowly headed in her direction, expecting a nightmare to explode out of the darkness to attack and kill me, and I was dreading the prospect. After some time, I finally found Penny, thankfully alive, but cowering and shaking under a big tree. I hugged her up and I leashed her. I remember saying, "You let me know if he's coming. I'll let you loose. Just give me a chance to shoot." She did not want to walk, so I put her over my shoulders around my neck and I carried her. I was honestly so scared to go back to the truck that I carried her across a chest-deep beaver swamp to get to the road. Then I ran up the driveway to my truck, threw Penny in the front, just waiting to be attacked from the darkness while doing so. Then I jumped in and I locked the doors. I was never so relieved to hear a motor start as I was that night. I took off fast for home, and when I got there, I went to my parents next door to get my daughter and tell them what had happened. My daughter believed me, but my parents laughed, thinking I was making it up. Wow, I could not believe it. I said, "Why would I make that up? If I did that, I'd make myself a hero or something, not seeming to be a coward." But I just dropped it, and they still don't believe me to this day, even with the other encounters that came later. Most people react that way, but I'm not embarrassed to tell of my encounters, no matter what anyone else thinks. I know there's something out there that we don't understand. That's what I know. I truly wish that these encounters never had happened. It's kind of ruined my passion for being in the woods. I continued hunting, forcing myself to go with a different dog to the same place the next night, and nothing abnormal occurred. But with each experience, my enthusiasm waned, and after around 5 years I found more excuses not to go, even after the encounters had stopped 2 years previous. I really hate the disabling primal fear that each encounter brought on, though in hindsight, if it wanted to harm me, it could have at any time, but didn't. I think that must have been how cavemen felt when a saber-toothed tiger roared in the dark. I hope to get back in the woods, at least squirrel hunting during the day this fall. This year, I really am going to try to. Every word of this is true. I can't believe that there's people who actively go out trying to find Bigfoot. They're asking for trouble in my book. Again, this is my absolutely honest account. If you're interested in hearing about any of my other encounters, let me know. The last one was more frightening than the first, but the ones in between were hair-raising in their own ways too. Thank you for your time. My name is Wayne Campbell. I grew up in southeast Ohio, not far from Athens. My father and I used to go out looking for fossils. The best locations were creek beds, riverbanks, and especially after heavy rains. We didn't go to many of the public places around to do our fossil hounding. They were usually really picked over. But Dad knew someone that had property that had sections of Sunday Creek running through it. I remember this guy's place was up towards Millfield. We had been there a couple of times before, and we were going back one day that summer, not long before school started. I remember the day was scorching hot, sweltering with thick humidity that was worse because of the recent rain the day before. We get out there, start digging around, and every once in a while, I would see my dad lift his head and stare. It didn't seem that he was really looking at anything, but he was more listening. I was wrong, but I didn't know that at the time. I didn't hear anything, and I didn't see anything, so I kept poking around the creek bank. At some point, I lifted my head and looked up and down the creek. Then I looked across the creek. I was startled to see a face looking back at me. Before I could say anything, it pulled back, and it was gone in the dense foliage. I just stared at the area across the creek, wondering, did I imagine it? And then I imagined that I could see a dark shape behind all the foliage. Maybe I could see it. Somehow, though, I managed to convince myself I hadn't seen anything, and for some reason that I still can't explain, I chose not to say a word to my dad. I felt safe and I just went back to poking around for fossils. But at least half of my attention was now diverted looking at the other side of the creek every so often. I told myself that if I saw it again, I would say something. What I would tell him exactly, I had no idea. I had seen a face with eyes, a nose, and a mouth, but what kind of face it was, what the face belonged to, I couldn't say. I had never seen anything like it before. I kept watching that way, and sure enough, in a few minutes the strange face was back. It didn't push through the foliage as far this time, but I saw it plain enough. Everything on that face was a muddy brown color, or one shade lighter or one shade darker. Its fur covered the outer face and around the mouth. Its lips, nose, and around its eyes looked a little more like leather, but not quite skin either. It was a darker muddy brown shade of skin or leather. I couldn't see the eyes clearly. I could only see the impressions of darkness where they should be. It was darker there than either the fur or the leather skin. But saying all of that, I still can't say that I saw the eyes, just the impression and the shadows of where they should be. The face was very high up in the brush, which also added to my confusion. Taller than any man, taller than a bear. We spent maybe 4 or 5 seconds looking at each other directly. I was looking for something on that face or its shape that would tell me I was looking at a bear. Maybe I was looking at an escaped monkey. Or maybe it would tell me that I was looking at a very ugly and very hairy human. But nothing fit. Now, with the understanding of an adult today, I realize staring at it probably wasn't the best move. But little 10-year-old me didn't know that. Its face pushed through the brush a few more inches, and with it came the whole head and the upper torso. Now I really was a confused little boy. But I kept staring at it. Why I didn't say something to my dad right away, I really don't know. Mesmerized, maybe? Now I think I need to give you a little backfill on my dad and me. My dad was in the 9th Marine Regiment fighting on Hamburger Hill in Vietnam the very day that I was born, May 14th, 1969. He had married my mom not long before he shipped out for Vietnam, and he left me as a souvenir with her, so to speak. Now that's what my mom always said. My dad always said he left me as an anchor that made sure he was going to come home. Now, all that mushy stuff aside, thing is, Dad always had a gun on him. It didn't matter if all we were doing was going to the Piggly Wiggly. Vietnam had my dad shook for a long, long time. Mom said he came home completely different. He was always looking for some enemy in the bushes along the field as we stood and talked to people after church. And that day at the creek, he was carrying one of his favorite guns. It was a Colt .45 revolver. I think it was called a second generation, but I'm not sure. I wish I had that gun. But sometime in the later years, he loaned it to his brother who had found himself in, let's call a bit of a pickle. And that gun just somehow never came back. It was like that in those days. But the point is, my dad would not leave the house without a gun on him somewhere. Now, when he went out into civilization, as he called it, think taking a trip to the Piggly Wiggly, he would wear that gun in a shoulder holster under a loose button-up short-sleeve shirt. If we weren't worrying about looking civilized, like traipsing around the woods and up and down a creek like we were that day, he wore that holster openly on the outside of his shirt. Now, think back. This was roughly 1979. The world was a very different place, and no one in rural Ohio raised an eyebrow if you saw someone with a gun. It was a different world. Now, the thing is, my mom would put her foot down about carrying a gun into places like church, so Dad would drop us off, and then he would pick us back up. So anyway, for those of you that don't know, a .45 is a pretty darn serious gun. That's no little .22 pistol. But I wasn't thinking at all about that gun. At that minute, I was staring at a beast that I had no name for, and it really wasn't too far from us, just across the creek and up on the bank in a bush. It would seem that at some point my father either said something to me or asked me a question, and when I did not answer, he homed in on what I was looking at. Now, you'd have thought someone threw a grenade at us. I can't even tell you exactly how, but in a flash, my dad had dragged me off the creek bank and shoved me down behind a wide tree that had a lot of scrub brush around it. He quickly took up a defensive position while assessing our safest exit. His .45 was already out. From my position, belly down in the dirt, I could see through the brush to the creek. I saw the little bright blue of the little bucket that I had collected all my fossils in. It was lying abandoned there on the creek bank. My shovel and digging blade were both lying nearby. Dad was crouched with one knee on the dirt next to me, one hand pushing between my shoulder blades to keep me down low, the other holding his gun, angling to see around the tree carefully, and looking through the brush toward the beast across the creek. I remember my dad's shallow, ragged breathing. Then I heard branches and leaves moving. I heard 3 dragging splashes in the creek, like something walking through the water. My father held his breath, and I felt him tense up. Then I saw a wet, furry foot and a leg step near my blue bucket. Then came the other foot and leg. These were massive-sized feet. Its ankles were probably the width of something between a softball and a small melon. My view, though, was cut off part way up the calves, but they were equally wide and very muscular. I saw the ball at the back of the calf muscle working when it stepped up on the bank. Then I saw a muddy brown, fur-covered hand reach down for my little blue bucket on the creek bank. The hand was shaped exactly like ours, but much, much larger, and of course, furry. The Colt 45's thumb hammer was already cocked back. I guess Dad had cocked it when he pulled it out of the holster. I was aware of it from the top of my vision as I watched him lower it slow and steady, presumably bringing it even with the massive beast at the creek. Those moments seemed to last forever at the time. It was the stress of watching, waiting, not moving, hardly breathing, making sure you didn't make a sound. Those moments were terrible, and they lasted, really, it felt like, forever. I can't imagine how my dad endured all of those kinds of moments during Vietnam, and I knew there must have been many of them. And even at my young age, I knew that somehow he had endured them, and he had come home, which meant that I knew he knew a thing or two about how to get through these kinds of awful moments. That's the best that my young mind could figure it out. So I stayed down, stayed quiet, and waited. I watched this large hand turn my bucket upside down, and my hard-won fossils all tumbled out onto the dirt and on the rocks. I guess it didn't see a use for the bucket or what had been in it, so it ended up dropping it. When it dropped the bucket, it made a metal clang on the rocks. It must have maybe liked the sound, because it picked up the bucket and banged it several times on the rocks. It was like a toddler smacking wood blocks together just for the noise. It banged my little bucket a few times, and then it banged it too hard, and it got bent and was now deformed. The next clanging sounds weren't as pleasant as the first ones. There was a loud grunt, and the bucket was forcefully tossed down on the rocks. I saw the feet and legs walk a few paces, then come back to stand directly opposite of our position in the brush. I saw them take one step closer to us and stop. I felt my father tense up, his hand again on my shoulder blades, pushing down now very, very hard. So hard, I had to bite my lip not to yell at him to please stop, because it was hurting. I was laying on some sharp rocks. Suddenly, my nostrils were full of a fishy, muddy creek water smell, and I suddenly knew it was the beast's feet and legs I was smelling. They were wet, and they smelled terrible. and it was very close. I expected to hear that gun fire at every moment, but it didn't. Again, this moment seemed to spin out forever and ever. I watched those smelly feet only just a few feet from my face on the other side of the brush, waiting desperately for something to happen. And then suddenly there came a sound that, to this day, I don't have a direct description for. I guess you could call it a voice, but it wasn't talking, not like we think of talking, but it was vocalizing, but not howling, yelling, or screaming. I don't have a word to describe it. It was like a questioning sound. Then I realized there was another beast across the creek calling out. That's the best description that I can give. The one on the other side of the brush right across from us shifted on its feet. It seemed to hesitate just a second, with one foot turned and flexed to walk away. It paused, it waited, and then it walked away. Then I heard the splish-splash dragging sound as it walked back across the creek, and at the same time I heard it replying to the one that called. They hung around on the opposite bank for another minute to a minute and a half. The whole time they were making noises to each other in what I can only assume was some kind of communication. Then you could hear them moving away, and their conversation also faded away. I started to move to get up, thinking the coast was clear, but my dad held me down, and then he whispered one word, "Wait." He whispered it so softly, I wasn't sure I heard it. When Dad was finally satisfied that it was safe to move, he suddenly pulled me up. He didn't give me a chance to do or say anything. He put his finger to my lips, then he slung me over his shoulders like he was carrying out another wounded fellow Marine. And by God, my dad ran with me on his shoulders like that. He did a half turn a couple times to look behind. Then I heard him say as he ran, "Keep a watch on the back of us." I did. I lifted my head out of the small of his back, and I tried to keep watch behind us like he said. But nothing came after us. When we got back to where we were parked at his friend's house, he was sitting out on the porch. Previously, we always stopped and we spoke with this man. He was a wonderful man, and he would always show some interest in all the fossils I had collected, and he would listen enraptured at everything I had to say. But this time, we did not stop. We did not chat. Dad yelled up to him, and he made a fib, and he said, "He took a fall. He's all right, but I'm taking him home." The man nodded and said that'd be all right. Let him know how things were. We got in Dad's car, and we left. I had been okay when all of this was going down. I mean, I was afraid, but I kept it together. But the very minute we pulled out of that man's driveway, I started crying. I couldn't stop. Big, hot tears were rolling down my face, and I was taking big gulps of air. It was that kind of hard crying. I had no idea why, and I couldn't control it. Dad just told me it'll be all right, don't worry about it. And that's all he said over and over till we got home. But before we got home, he pulled over into a store parking lot, and we sat there for a while. He wanted to give me time to pull myself together. Then he gave me a very long talk about how you have to hold it together whenever you find yourself under heavy fire, and he told me I did real good. Now, I thought at first he was just talking about what you have to do to survive a war, but he said no. He wanted me to know that many times as I grew up and in my life, I would find myself under heavy fire in a lot of different scenarios, whether it be home, work, relationships. Whatever it was, he wanted me to know, hold it together under heavy fire, and you'll be all right. It was a really long talk, and he did most of the talking while I stopped crying and tried to listen. It was a long talk, and I only remember parts of it, but I'm sure you get the gist of it. Now, after that, we had a rule. I could talk about it any time I wanted. My dad said just come to him, and we would talk about it. But he was not bringing it up to me. He said we all have to deal with trauma in our own way. Looking back, I guess he really was speaking from experience. But he said it was my call. If I just wanted to forget it and never mention it again in my life, he would be okay with that too. And at that age, I really did just want to forget it. And it seemed like for a while, I was able to do that. I don't know, sometime in my teens, maybe 15 or 16 years old, I was watching television, and I had recently seen some Bigfoot stuff. So I had to know. So I went to Dad, and I asked. And I got an earful about that day, things I didn't know. There was a lot that went on that day that I had been completely unaware of. For starters, Dad said he knew right away there was more than one when he put me behind that tree. He thought there might even been a third or a fourth one inside the bush line. He said that is why he didn't shoot at it. He really didn't think that he could take 2 or 3 of them down without having to reload. And that would have been a logistical nightmare, considering his extra ammo was in a pants pocket with a zipper. In short, he didn't think he would win that fight. And when I was seeing and smelling those dirty, furry feet just a couple feet away from us on the other side of the brush, Dad said that thing had poked its head right over the brush and was looking directly down at us. That's when he was pushing down on me so hard. He apologized. He said he didn't realize it. Dad also said that Bigfoot stood there looking at us for about 3 seconds, and it only walked away when the other one called out to it. What might have happened if the other hadn't made a sound? We don't know. Now, there was a lot more that Dad and I talked about from that whole day, about how it felt and how it affected us. What I mostly remember is my dad's wisdom telling me over and over, all of us deal with our trauma in our own way, and whatever helped, that's what I needed to do. So he stressed again and again, I can talk any time about it. But I wasn't as traumatized as you might have thought a young boy would be. It was scary, but I got through it. Now, we never did go fossil searching on that piece of property again. The guy that owned that place was a good friend of my dad's, and he ended up telling him what happened that day. Again, I only found that out much later. Now, my dad's friend said he wasn't aware of anything going on out there, and Dad said he did believe him. He wouldn't have let Dad go out there, much less take me, if he had thought for 1 second there was something dangerous there. Maybe those Bigfoot were just passing through. Maybe they were just following the creek because it was shady. It was so hot out, and it was a ready supply of water, and maybe some little snacks like frogs or something. We have no more information on it. All we can do is guess. But throughout my life, it's been a mind-blowing thing to see all the reports from Athens County and the surrounding areas. My dad has been surprised, too. Yes, I saw that Bigfoot briefly, but I have remembered it my whole life, and I'm good if I never see another one. Thanks, signed, Wayne. All right, my Sasquatch. Well, there you have it. 2 fresh emails straight from Ohio. And listen up, Adam, the first one that sent in the email. Adam, if you're listening, and I'm going to email you back, please go ahead and send your other encounters in. Please do, because you know we want to hear them. And thank you, Wayne, for such an incredible encounter. I could just picture every little thing that you said. Both emails were wonderful. Thank you so much. And listen, everyone, I know you were probably expecting this to come out last night, but I was having some, we'll call them technical difficulties. Luckily, Amazon delivered overnight today, and I have some new pieces of recording equipment again. So anyway, better late than never. All right, everyone. Well, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We'll be getting together again real soon. And until we do, please always remember, absence of proof is not proof of absence. Thanks for listening.